I'm recording.
I'm admitting him. Ready?
Yes. Hey.
Oh, there he is.
There he is.
Hi, kids.
And you have a super cool background.
Right?
Thank you. That's
Very
the green
nice.
screen and a stolen photograph.
That's so cool. I need to figure out how to do something cool like that.
Yeah, mine's a backdrop too. I'm really inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, then there's an amazing virtual background if that's your background.
We're just that skilled,
Well, you need to buy a green screen.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's on the list.
Say again?
I said, oh yeah, that's on the list. Green screen.
Yeah, and there's tons of free virtual backgrounds on the internet. So
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining our podcast, Mr. Frank King.
let's see. I'll make sure, yeah, because I had a Zoom schedule as well. It just popped up, but there you are.
Yes, thank you so much. So yeah, this is Life in the Faust Lane with Mary and Jared Faust.
Hello.
Yes, figured.
And our guest here today is Mr. Frank King. You're ready to just dive on in, Frank?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Cool.
I'm starting off with a personal question. What was the driving force, you'd say, for you to merge comedy with some pretty intense mental health subjects, or is it something you found almost impossible to separate?
B would be the answer. Yeah, in 2010, after the speaking business dropped off 80% practically overnight, we filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and I could tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. Spoiler alert, I didn't pull the trigger.
Fantastic.
We're very happy to hear that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A friend of mine heard me speak. He never heard me say that out loud about not pulling the trigger, and he came up afterwards, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I go, "Hey, man, could you try to sound a little less disappointed?"
Right?
Yeah. It runs in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide.
It runs in our family also.
Yeah, I've never had a name to put to it. Generational depression and suicide, you said?
Yeah, my grandmother did. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days.
Yeah,
if you want to,
your TED Talk where you described told that story.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yeah.
And I think it's so cool that you're using that story that could have potentially really taken you out also. You're using it to flip it around and talk about it. That's kind of a big deal on our podcast, is just talk about these things.
Well, and that's what I get paid for. That's how I make my living. My clients often tell me, "Look, we just brought you in here to start the conversation on suicide."
Yes.
Because
don't beat around the bush, I guess.
Yeah.
No.
There's no time.
Yeah, the thing is, hardly anybody talks about depression, thoughts of suicide, even though one person dies every 11 minutes in the U.S. of suicide. But I discovered early on, if you bring it up, everybody's got a story. So
absolutely, it tends to be a very relatable subject for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I speak not only to the mentally ill people in the audience when I speak, but also the neurotypicals, trying to decode the thought process, because they really have no context. They can't understand how life could be so bad that you'd want to end it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We've all met those people. I feel like I have been that person, especially when I was younger, not fully understanding suicide. I felt the anger at that person, and
Sure.
it takes time and learning to understand. It's just a subject I think we need to be talking more about. So I'm so glad we found you, Frank.
Yes.
I do want to mention Frank is known as the mental health comedian. I think that's a great name. When I see that, I'm like, I need to be this person's friend in some way, or at least.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I will carry us on here to ask, how can our listeners find you, Frank? How can they contact you? What are you going to be up to in the upcoming months? Let us all know, please.
Well, you can go to the thementalhealthcomedian.com or just type in the words "the mental health comedian" into your Google search. I worked very hard to brand myself.
Yeah.
I work with speakers and people who want to do TEDx talks. I go, look, you need a brand.
Yeah.
You know, like Life in the Faust Lane would be a great TEDx title. It's a great name for a podcast. I do dearly hope you have bought the URL for the same name, the domain name, lifeinthefaustlane.com. I recommend a book by the say again.
We're getting on that.
Yeah, I'll get on that right away, because if your podcast is called that and your TED Talk is called that and your domain name is that,
Yeah.
then if you wrote a book with that name, then you're beginning to brand yourself, because they may not remember your first name, but they will remember something catchy like Life in the Faust Lane.
Yeah.
So I chose actually a friend of mine came up with the mental health comedian, and that became my brand. And I just booked a gig for November 18th virtually, town in New Jersey. They've had a rash of suicides. And the woman called me up and she said, yeah, we were looking for somebody to speak on suicide. And she goes, I looked through, innumerable suicide prevention speakers, and I watched their videos, and I had to have a heavy, a stiff drink. And then, and I came across yours, average guy, depression, thoughts of suicide, and funny. Oh, dear God, that's what we need.
Yeah.
So that's my niche. They say in speaking, the riches are in the niches. Same thing for podcasts, I believe.
Yes. Well, thank
No.
you for that.
Yeah.
Like we're gleaning some valuable information.
Yeah. As soon as we get done with the podcast, buy lifeinthefaustlane.com or whatever.
Yeah.
Definitely gonna get that domain name.
Yeah.
This I guess kind of segues into my first question. It's I think you kind of even touched on it. It was just what made you want to make yourself vulnerable, put yourself out there, and discuss mental health, because it is something that I feel most people like to keep inside. They'll have little circles they may divulge that information to, but you putting it out there for the world to see. What was the driving point for you? What just made you ultimately feel the need to do that, to put yourself out there?
Well, I've been doing stand-up since day after Christmas, 1985.
Wow.
My girlfriend then, my wife now, 33 years, went on the road for 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop, comedy club for 7 years.
Oh my gosh.
Did a little radio, and then after that comedy club boom had busted, I'd always been a clean comic, so I jumped to the corporate comedy side. And I always wanted to have a message, some content, something to teach people. I wanted to go from a funny speaker to a speaker who was funny. And I just thought I could never figure out what I was going to talk about. And then I came close to killing myself, took a look at my family history, got some education in suicide prevention, and thought, that's what I'm going to do. And then the trick for me was rebranding from funny guy, funny speaker to speaker who was funny. So my wife said we should do a TED Talk. And I said, what's a TED Talk? And she explained it. That week I got an email from a TED Talk up in Vancouver, British Columbia saying, would you like to apply? Sure. So I applied and I got it. First time out. It's rare, but I got it.
Yeah.
What year was that?
2014.
Okay.
14.
And then I got a call from the Chamber of Commerce locally, where I was a member. And they said, look, our speaker bailed out for tomorrow. Could you come in and do 20 minutes? And I said, yes, if I can do a dress rehearsal of my TED Talk. And they said, fine. Not knowing that, assuming I was going to do 20 minutes of comedy. So I go to the chamber meeting. There's probably 75 people there. I've known them for, 4 years at that point. So I have my notes, my PowerPoint. I got my face buried in my notes. I'm doing my PowerPoint. I get to the end. I look up. They're all standing, all applauding. Half of them are crying. And I thought, hello.
You're on to something.
Yeah. And then that's when I discovered that half a dozen came up to me individually afterwards at different times with a story. And I thought that's the ticket, is that it happens every 11 minutes, but nobody talks about it unless you bring it up.
Yeah.
So I get paid a lot of money. I mean, if I'd known how much money there was in Crazy, I would have started long ago.
2020 has definitely lifted the veil of many people's crazies too. So it's kind of at least I would say worldwide, but I'll speak for the U.S. A lot of the the crazies came out. So let's keep talking about it.
Well, and what I really do is I stand up on stage, and as Brene Brown says, my superpower is vulnerability. You don't see a lot of guys talking about emotional things, their emotions on stage. And I talk about my near attempt and, so forth and so on. And it gives people in the audience permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences without recrimination.
Yes.
So that's really my job, is just to come in and give everybody cover, because people have an idea what mental illness looks and sounds like. But here's a guy on stage, comic, former writer for the Tonight Show for 20 years, obviously high functioning, nuttier than a squirrel turd. And he's, obviously it helps the people who are mentally ill, and it helps people who are neurotypical, who don't understand. I try to dispel some myths like suicide's a selfish act. Well, not really in the mind of the person who's suicidal, because there's something in suicidology called burdensomeness. The person who's suicidal believes they're a burden and the world would be better off without them. So in fact, in their mind, it's a selfless act. It's illogical, but I had $1 million life insurance policy. My wife was going to be brokenhearted, but she wasn't going to be broke after I got done. So that was what I was thinking. And there, people say, well, why did somebody want to die? Well, chances are they didn't want to die. They just wanted to end the pain.
Yeah.
So I tried to decode the whole process for people who have no idea, I can't really wrap their mind around that sort of, thinking.
So you're essentially just bridging the gap between the two parties, the ones that really understand it and the ones that don't have the understanding, just trying to bridge that gap so there's some common factors between the two.
And my fourth TED Talk, called Suicide, the Secret of My Success. And if you'd like to hear the story of why it's the secret of my success, I'll tell you.
Absolutely, I would.
I was in Pensacola doing a TED Talk. There was a mother and daughter there vacationing in Pensacola. And they typed into Google, what to do in Pensacola. And up came the TEDx talk. And they saw a suicide prevention speaker, the mental health comedian. So they came, they paid $95 a piece. Ooh. Yeah, they're charging $95. And when I was backstage, I was in the first, what they call flight of speakers. I was going to go in the first 4, I guess. Somebody said to me, are you leaving after you get done? I said, I can't leave. Why can't you leave? I said, well, when we break for lemonade, watch what happens. So we break for lemonade. Sure enough, 8 people lined up to talk to me, including his mother and daughter. And they came because her brother had been terribly depressed to the point where he lost his job, couldn't support himself, so he moved in with her. And about 3 months in, he seemed to be getting better. And then one evening she came home and he ended his life. And she had that question, why did he want to kill himself? And I said, well, chances are, I'm just guessing, but chances are he didn't want to kill himself. He just wanted to end the pain. Because basically what you wanted to know was, I'd gone to the edge, looked into the abyss, and come back. He'd gone to the edge, looked into the abyss, and did not come back. And so they want to know, what's the difference? Why you came back? Why my loved one did not? So that's basically my job, and it's my purpose, my passion. It is worldwide. I got an email from a guy somewhere in Scandinavia. He was 40, good job, lovely wife, darling 8-year-old daughter, miserable. Couldn't remember last time he was happy. He said in his email. Thought he was all by himself. Thought he's the only one in the world felt that way. And he stumbled across my TEDx talk. And he said, then I realized for the first time in my life that I'm not alone. And so we traded emails. And I said, look, when time comes, when you're ready, share what you told me with your family and your close friends who'll understand. Because I think you'll find your burden will lift a bit if they know and understand what you're going through. So yeah, the TEDx, the beauty of it is I got a DM from a young woman I reached out to on Twitter. I reached out to connect, and she sent me a DM back. She goes, I can't believe it's you. I'm like, she goes, I was at my lowest point last fall, and I came across your TED Talk. And it was just the ray of hope I needed. I thought, if he can do it, I can do it. And she goes, I took a sabbatical, best thing I ever did. Went back to work 12 weeks later, and I'm not fine, but I'm not going to kill myself. And it's because you got up on stage, you were willing to be vulnerable and share your story. And it was just the seed of hope that I needed to go on. So that's the power of a TEDx.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still going over the fact that I think one of my biggest hiccups is you said you put $95 to it, and it seems like what you do is priceless. Like it's so hard to put a price to that because it's what the world needs, and you've already saved lives, and to me that is something that's what life's all about, connecting and helping people understand you're not going through it alone. And it seems to me the past 2 years I've just seen this boom. I mean, maybe not a boom, but there seems to be a lot more people, independent artists that are sticking their necks out there to talk about this subject, and we need a lot more of it. And Frank, you seem just amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, and I have something called chronic suicidal ideation, and I talked about it in that TEDx talk, which means for me and people in my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And the story I tell is my car broke down. I had 3 thoughts unbidden: get it fixed, buy a new one, I could just kill myself. And that's chronic suicidal ideation in a nutshell, pardon the pun. And young woman came up after a college presentation. She goes, "Thank you for your keynote." I said, "You're welcome." She said, "But I got to tell you, it made me weep." "How did it make you weep?" She goes, "Well, you know your story about the car, get it fixed, buy a new one, just kill yourself." She goes, "I've been having those thoughts all my life. I had no idea it had a name. I thought I was some kind of freak, completely alone. And when I heard you say that, I realized for the first time in my life that I was not in fact alone, and I wept." Again.
And the power of that.
Yeah, the power of just sharing those feelings and letting them know. And then my second thought was, I'm sort of like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, in that I've seen what people's lives might be like if I weren't there to speak and let them know they're not alone.
Yeah.
And then my third thought was, now I can't kill myself because I take all those people with me who never got a chance to hear me speak. So I'm stuck.
You're stuck. Yep.
You gotta do it. You've been shown your purpose, Frank.
Yeah, and it's something. When I coach TEDx, my favorite students. I mean, I love them all, but one of my TEDx students, a new one, sent in half a dozen applications. The first application she sent in was to a TEDx in Rhode Island, and she got a call back and audition, so we worked on that. And today she found out she's doing it.
Yeah.
Her first application, she's doing a TEDx.
Wow.
And the reason I tell you the story is she has mental illness, depression, some other things. And she knows she came close enough to dying that she knows she went to the kitchen after drinking quite a bit, because she knew she had to be drunk to do it. She's staring at the block of knives, the wooden block of the knives sticking out, trying to figure out which one would be the best one to slit her throat. And so she still remembers the bite of the cold steel against her neck. But she started crying, and she decided she just couldn't do it. And she wrote a book. Her name is Olivia. She wrote a book called Live, L-I-V, to Tell.
Live to Tell.
And her TED Talk is called, by the way, wait for it, Live to Tell. And her domain name is, wait for it, Live to Tell. So, and the subtitle is Live to Tell, and the subtitle is Depression is Just a Visitor.
Absolutely.
And so
I was going to ask you about, actually. I was going to ask you about that, and if you touch on that on any of your TED Talks, because I think what happens is we get those suicidal thoughts that start, and then they just keep coming, and then we get ourselves mentally into that feeling of, I'm so alone, and the world would be better off without me. Not only am I alone, but my presence here is adding more grief to my loved one. So now we're in that spot. But that shift for me was learning the importance of not taking those thoughts and things so seriously, just letting them be, letting them exist, but almost stepping back a little bit to just look at them and have that thought of, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that I am believing so hardcore that in these thoughts that it's making me want to end my life? That almost is what I feel like the missing link can be, is we're not we're taking these thoughts and feelings so seriously when that's all they are, just thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, the problem I think a problem is that when I'm in that state, when I'm cycling down in depression, it's a short cycle, a couple, 3 days. Feels like somebody's turning up gravity, having trouble putting one foot in front of the other. You know, it's like wearing lead boots. And you get to the point where you can't see beyond today. You assume it'll always be this way. And what I've trained myself to do is, once you know your cycle, once you know what you're living with, once you realize it's going to last, mine lasts about 3 days, down the first day, flatten out, back up the third. You know, you just go, okay, here we go again. Everybody hold on.
Yeah, this is a part of life. Life's a roller coaster.
Yeah, but it takes some self-awareness to realize, because again, a lot of people, when they're in that state, they just can't see that tomorrow is going to be, any better. And what I do is, the teaching I do when I do a keynote is simply planting a seed of hope.
Yeah.
And, if you can just hang on, it's with time and medication and therapy, things will get better.
Yes.
It's just now I've lived with it so long. People go, you have those thoughts all the time.
Yep.
It's like mental music. It's always running in the background, or DOS on an old computer.
Yeah.
It's just, they're not really serious. I mean, they're serious thoughts, but not really a serious chance that I'm going to, kill myself because my car broke down. That's why God created AAA.
Yeah. I think not letting the thoughts grab the steering wheel of our lives. They can be there in our heads, but as long as a little piece of us is hanging onto the steering wheel, we can get past them. I don't think anyone that I know is reaching enlightenment anytime soon. And so I think that we're all, to a certain degree, we all struggle with this. And sadly, I couldn't believe the numbers that you mentioned at the beginning of the TED Talk I watched. It just blew my mind at how many people take their lives, and
it's double the amount of homicides. That definitely tells you something. It's not.
Well, and in that first TEDx, I mentioned 37,000 a year, and that was 6 years ago. Last year was 47,000, and this year, because of the pandemic and COVID, they suspect another 30, 40, 50,000 deaths by suicide.
On top of that?
On top of that number.
Oh,
and those numbers do not include opioid deaths. That's a separate 65,000.
And that's the other huge problem in America right now. And I was going to ask, what is your personal take on medicating for depression?
Well, I live in the state of Oregon, and they've just passed psilocybin.
Oh.
As a treatment. Now it won't happen. It won't go into effect until January 2023. However, there's research from, going back decades on psilocybin, and we're talking microdoses.
Yes, microdosing. Very important distinction.
Yeah. And it is apparently more effective on certain mental illnesses than the psychotropics, with far fewer side effects and at a much smaller dose.
Yep.
So I didn't take any medication when I was 60. I didn't have anything against medication. I took a supplement called SAM-E, S-A-M-E. You can buy it at Costco. It's good on mild depression. Yeah, SAM-E. I still take 400 milligrams in the morning on an empty stomach every day. And it's just enough to take the edge off. It only has 2 side effects. It's good for your liver, good for your joints. So
those are the side effects, huh? Hey, sign me up.
Yeah, it carried me from 1995 until I turned 60. My wife goes, just ask the doctor.
Yeah.
So I asked the doctor, who is supposed to ask me every time I go those 2 gateway questions. Are you taking less enjoyment in social activities than you have in the past? And number 2, have you been hopeless in the last 2 weeks? He never asked me. I was supposed to. So when I said to him, how about some antidepressants? And he goes, why? And so I gave him a thumbnail sketch of that first TEDx talk you saw, and he couldn't get to his prescription pad fast enough. So he prescribed Wellbutrin. Just
yes. I've been on it myself.
Half the people who take it hate it. Half the people who take it love it to death. And it worked for me. And 2 weeks in, my wife noticed the difference in my personality. At 3 weeks, I noticed the difference. And I had this thought unbidden since I was in high school. I like my life.
Wow.
Now, I've got a great life anyway. I've got a wonderful wife and, animals and career and whatever. But just that particular thought I hadn't had. And then my second thought was, what was I waiting for?
Just some
Yeah.
basic self-care, right?
Well, and something else I educate people about is if the Wellbutrin had not worked, because, the doctor only knows pretty much what the drug salesman tells him. That's why I always ask my pharmacist before I take anything. If it not worked, there's a cheek swab DNA test for psychotropics. They take your DNA and they see if they can't match it with an antidepressant or two that will work best with your metabolism.
Wow.
So a lot less of a lab rat, go on, taper off, go on, taper off. So yeah, it's a couple $100. Most insurances cover it. Been around for years. There's 4 or 5 companies that do it. And GeneSight, GeneSite or SIGHT. Anyway, just type in psychotropics DNA test cheek swab. You'll find half a dozen companies that do it.
That's really cool. That's the first time I've ever heard.
Yeah, first time I ever heard it. That's amazing. Is one of the side effects of your medication aging very well? Because you said you're 60, or maybe that's just a switch to the mental health. But yeah.
I think doing what you love for a living, which I have been doing since '85, helps. And I'm my self-care plan. I'm on the keto diet. I do intermittent fasting. I fast only 22 hours a day and eat for 2. And been bodybuilding since I was 62. I went to my first contest at 62, natural bodybuilding, which is part of my self-care plan. So, guys, you can't
tell on this video, but Frank is buff.
Oh yeah.
The problem is you can't tell this video because I got my clothes on.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, if you saw a picture of me in a tank top, you go, damn.
Seen it. I researched you. I was like, Frank?
Right?
Yeah, well, I'm going to write a book someday called Look Good Naked.
Look Good Naked.
Because I'm
do our punchy podcast, so woo! No, don't. Unless you want to.
With my clothes on, people can't tell. They're like, you bodybuild, really?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing about bodybuilding is when you get to be 60, you join the master's class. And they're not about size so much as proportion, vascularity, muscularity. It's not about being huge.
No, you just want to feel strong and good in your body until you die. That's my plan.
Yeah, well, and people say, how much can you bench? I don't care. My goal is, I want to look like I can bench a lot. I don't care if I can actually do it or not.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to ask Frank, any advice that you have for friends and family members of people who are experiencing those suicidal thoughts? So maybe if there's any red flags that you could recommend for people, because I think a lot of times people aren't picking up on the red flags of their loved ones. And then any advice, because I know I have been in that position of knowing some people who are talking about suicide, and I feel so lost and confused. I don't know what to say. I've just Googled, how do I, talk to a suicidal person, what's to say, anything that you can share for those out there who maybe know people who are suffering.
Well, and remember I mentioned suicide is the secret of my success. There's a subset of people, and me included, for whom I was married to my first wife, wonderful young woman. We were high school and college sweethearts. We just didn't belong together. I was selling insurance, great business, but that's what she wanted me to do. I was not going to the Comedy Store open mic night, which is where I felt like I belonged. And so I came to a point, and I think many people do. I came to a point where I thought, if I don't change something, I'm going to kill myself sooner rather than later. So my next thought was, what the heck? I could divorce my wife, quit my job, try comedy, which is where I think I belong. If it doesn't work out, hell, I can still kill myself.
Always an option.
That's why suicide is the secret of my success. It's if I stayed put, I would have died. So why not roll the dice? And there are few things on the planet more powerful than somebody with absolutely nothing to lose.
Yeah.
I believe Anthony Bourdain was in that situation when he was at Vassar. I believe that Kate Spade was the head of the accessories department at Vanity Fair, a big-time job, but thought, in my mind, I hear her saying to herself, I'm not supposed to be reviewing other people's fashions. I'm supposed to have a fashion line.
Yeah.
Untreated mental illness, except for self-medication, probably having suicidal thoughts, thought to herself, if I stay here, I'm going to kill myself. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to quit. I'm going to start my own line. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, unfortunately, both those people ended their lives. Both were untreated, except for self-medication. Anyway, the signs and symptoms, this is pretty much the curriculum that I teach. Signs and symptoms of depression, thoughts of suicide. Signs of depression: have difficulty getting up in the morning, rally in the afternoon. Don't take as much joy in social activities they used to take joy in, back when we had social activities. Here's one you can actually spot on Zoom. There's COVID casual, which is my button-down shirt and whatever. Then there's, depressed casual, because what happens when people are depressed oftentimes is they let their personal hygiene go. The hair's dirty, the clothes are dirty. It's because they can't get out of bed, drag themselves to the bathroom, run a load of wash. So that's a big, big sign of somebody who's living with depression. The question comes up, what do you say? Well, here's what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, turn that frown upside down. Have you tried fish oil? Yeah. Can't tell you how many times.
Oh yeah.
What you do say is, if they say they're depressed, okay, look, I'm here for you and I mean it. I'm not crazy. I know you're not crazy, lazy, or self-absorbed. I know that depression is a mental illness. The good news is, with time and treatment, things will get better. I'll take the time to help you get the treatment. And here's the question you have to ask. And if you can't ask this question, find somebody who can. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Just like that.
Straight to the
There's
point.
an old wives' tale. You should never mention the S word, suicide, in front of somebody who's depressed. And as a comedian, I love the reasoning. It might give them the idea. Oh, suicide. What a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? Now, let's say they're not forthcoming about their thoughts of suicide. How do you know? How can you tell? Well, talking about death and dying, Googling death and dying appears as a theme in their artwork, their music, their writing. They're getting their affairs in order. They're giving away prized possessions because they want to make sure those possessions go to the people they want them to go to when they are gone. Yeah. There's a counterintuitive one that's very dangerous, which is they've been depressed forever and for no apparent reason, happy beyond measure. And you're happy because finally they're happy. Well, here's the deal. They may be happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is finite. I've got a friend who is still here today, another speaker. We had a conversation. I was talking about my suicidality, and he goes, Frank, well, here's something you don't know about me. And basically the same story. And when he was in the depths of depression, the only thing that brought him any joy was planning his funeral. That was it. And the reason he's still here is he was writing a letter to his children, a suicide note. And in the letter, he was saying to them, you're smart, you're talented, there's nothing you can't do if you put your mind to it. Man. And the hypocrisy hit him like a sledgehammer. And so that's why he's still here. Yeah, but so let's say they do say they are having suicidal thoughts. What's next? Well, you ask them, do they have a plan? And if they have a plan, what is your plan? And if it's detailed, you need to get them on the phone with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Or if they're younger, there's a text line. Text the word help to 741-741.
741-741.
Yeah, text line 741. And usually there's somebody roughly the same age on the other end. Because, younger people tend to be more forthcoming in text.
Yeah.
Older people like me like talking on the phone.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, and if they will not pick up the phone, you pick up the phone, you dial the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The volunteer will do their best to talk the phone into the hand of the person in crisis. Now, if you're at a distance, because I get this question often, my college roommate who lives in Texas, I'm in Nebraska. I'm 1,000 miles away, and I've been reading his timeline on Facebook. It seems dangerous. I take a look. It is dangerous. What do I do? Well, do you know his physical address? Yes. Call the police in that town. Give them the physical address. Tell them the story he told me. Have them look at his timeline, and then ask them simply to go by and do a welfare check. Know this, if they get there and he's actively suicidal, he's probably going to be locked down for 3 days, no shoestrings or belt. And he's going to unfriend you on Facebook. But he will still be alive. Now, let's say they've got a plan, but it's not particularly detailed. Here's what and this is not in any book anywhere. Psychiatrists and I came up with this. Not particularly detailed. Got a plan, but it's sort of nebulous. My question would be, well, are you going to kill yourself? And if they say no, most important question, okay, tell me why not. Make them give voice to the reason they're going to stick around. And I gave voice to mine earlier. I said, because I feel like George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life. You know, I've seen what people's lives would be like if I weren't there to speak and let them know they're not alone. And if I kill myself, I would take all those people with me that didn't get to hear me speak. So make them give voice to, you know, why they're going to stick around. Now, the question always comes up, when do you dial 911? If they're in immediate danger to themselves or somebody else, you have no choice but to dial 911. Again, they're probably going to get locked down for 3 days. And that's very controversial, even in the mental health community, taking away somebody's freedom for 3 days. But, you know, 3 days of R&R, 3 hots and a cot, where you know you have no responsibilities, but just wind down, can be very palliative. So,
and I imagine they don't just set them, okay, go home now. I imagine they set them up with some
Plan?
plan afterwards.
outpatient. Yeah, unfortunately, there's a shortage of mental health providers in the U.S.
Yeah.
So they do their best to set you up with an outpatient plan, or you know, you can voluntarily stay longer if you like. And you know, if a judge says, the judge oftentimes will say, "Look, you're suicidal. We have 2 choices. You can go in on my order, or you can go in voluntarily for 3 days. It's your choice." And a lot of people choose to voluntarily go in for 3 days.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, it's, you know, some people have to force them in, but.
Yeah. Well, that is all great advice. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think this feels right to me that we're just having a normal conversation about suicide, because look at those numbers and look how they're rising right now during this insane time, because, you know, that feeling of loneliness, we've all been forced into more loneliness.
Well, and let me give you some, I've been doing podcast after podcast for neuronormal people because I realized early on that I have a skill set. People with mental illness who are high functioning have a skill set that's extremely valuable during a pandemic and social isolation. Because if you have mental illness, you wake up every morning in an uncertain world, whether there's a pandemic or not.
Yeah.
People don't understand, I don't think, neuronormal people, what it's like to live with mental illness. Let me give you a simile. There's a character in Greek mythology named Sisyphus.
Oh, yeah.
His crime was to give fire to man, which I'm glad he did because I love barbecue. But the other gods were pissed. So they make him roll a rock up a hill every day with the idea that when he gets it over the top of the hill, he can retire. But every time he gets near the top of the hill, it rolls back down to the bottom. Having a mental illness is like that. Every morning you wake up, there's a rock in the hill. Some mornings the rock is small, the hill's not so steep. Some days the rock is a boulder and the hill is Kilimanjaro. But every day there's a rock and a hill. And my job as a speaker is to make sure that anybody hears the sound of my voice, the next morning when they wake up, they can still move that rock.
Yep. I love it.
I just fell in love with him even more because he just used Greek mythology. It's one of my favorite things in the entire world. I love Greek mythology. You brought up Sisyphus and rolling the rock up the hill. I mean, it's just phenomenal.
I think our listeners who have been tuning into our podcast know that we've got those rocks, Jared and I.
Oh, we got those rocks.
Well, and you know what? The reason there's going to be another 40, 50, 60,000 suicides is because of something called situational depression. You've got all these neuronormal people, neurotypical, who've never lived with depression. They probably don't even know why they're feeling the way they are or what it is because they've never been there.
Yeah.
And they can't figure out why they can't drag themselves out of bed in the morning. And it's, and they fear, I suppose, if it's depression, taking an antidepressant, because they probably picture it as a life sentence. So I go on, they say, look, here's the deal. There are things you can do, short of medication. Do things that mentally ill people do. Matter of fact, my keynote is called Social Distancing and Staying Sane. Do not worry about your mentally ill friends, because most of my mentally ill friends have a self-care plan. Mine is diet. We talked about that. Exercise, good night's sleep, meditation, medication. And you need a schedule. They asked a guy who'd been in the space station for a year by himself. How in the world? I mean, that's social isolation.
Oh, yeah.
He said, one word, routine. He goes, I go to bed same time every night, roughly. I get up roughly the same time every day. I have my meals roughly the same time. My exercise time, same time. I binge watch, American Horror Story on Netflix, same time every day. And so you have to control the things you can control, which is what mentally ill people do. The rest of it just has to slide. I can't, all that rest of that stuff's above my pay grade.
Yes. So. Oh, I love that. It's so true.
Yeah,
we just did an episode on self-care and staying sane right now. And yeah, we dove into topics like that, meditating, things like that, and just really doing the best we can, and take it one baby step at a time. You don't have to become a bodybuilder tomorrow like Frank. But
the exercise about the same time every day. It helps with again, it's scheduling, it's consistency, controlling the things you can, because if you used to go to work, you got in the car at a certain time, you go to work at a certain time, you got there, you did a certain set of things, you came home. Now it's just, people at loose ends. And so it's, and I also said, if you're depressed, for goodness sakes, have a telemedicine mental health conversation. Yeah. And if medication's indicated, it's not a life sentence, have them prescribe some medication. If it doesn't work, do the cheek swab DNA test, see if you can't find one that works better.
Yep.
And just take it until this passes, and then you can taper off and go on with your life.
Yeah, it's like you just got to find that little bit of care for yourself and just take the next step that's placed before you. And I feel like you can, carry on. And I hope that, as we're talking and bringing comedy, lightheartedness into these dark areas of our, human psyche, that hopefully we can, come out on top as a human race.
and
well, go ahead.
Well, maybe you want to answer that because mine's going to throw it off of that subject real quick.
Oh, no, I just think my goal is to make talking about depression, thoughts, suicide, mental health, mental illness as easy as talking about the weather.
Yes.
And, people say to me, you're awfully cavalier about, because I talk to someone and go, hey, are you mentally ill? Well, that's quite the question. I'm guessing bipolar. Yeah, how? Shot in the dark.
We all know each other. We can, the mentally ill can spot each other in a crowd and be like,
oh yeah,
that's my new friend over there.
Yeah, it's some people undiagnosed, but So it's and I'm on my shows are on a network, the Mental Health News Radio Network.
Mental Health News Radio Network.
Yes, not but just Mental Health News Radio Network. It's the only podcast network dedicated solely to mental health. And there are 80 some podcasts. A young man, a friend of mine from North Carolina who's trans, just got the first trans podcast on that network. It's called Transpired.
Cool.
And,
fantastic. It's crazy. They have a whole network for that. I don't see that being pushed by any secret agenda anywhere. I mean, that's the stuff people need to know about. Shove that down our throat.
Every facet of mental health. Although I got to tell you, there are quite a few shows on narcissism. It's probably the number one topic.
It's an important topic.
I wonder why that is.
I had no idea how many narcissists were out there until I got hooked up with a network. I'm like, dear God.
I do have on the subject of comedy. For someone like me, everyone in my life, I've talked about it my whole life. My issue was actually breaking out of my protective shell to actually do it. I've wanted to be a stand-up my whole life. I've written literally hours of routine material, and I've done public speech and debate even. So it's not even a fear, but I think because this is my own personal, I'm not trying to sell a point on something political or this. I'm trying to sell my own ideas, and also at the same time hope that it gets some chuckles out of some people. And I'm 35, and I've had some people tell me it's too late to enter that realm, and I'm getting more comfortable with I don't think it's too late. I think you can break into it at 35. So
friend of mine, one of my speaker coaching clients and a longtime friend, is 55, started comedy 7 years ago, tried to be like all the other comics. He did okay, but he's Jewish. and he grew up going to the Catskills every summer.
My
And when
wife
he was a
is
kid,
Jewish.
young kid, he would sneak into the back of the room. You know, Jackie Mason and, you know, those guys, Norm Crosby.
Okay.
And that's in Dangerfield. That's solid comedy he likes.
Yeah.
One-liners.
Yeah.
And so he decided he would adopt the one-liner style. And rather than write jokes like everybody else does, he took old jokes and made them his own. And he won 2 comedy contests in Philadelphia, the 2 biggest comedy clubs in town, because he found his voice on stage.
Yeah.
At 55.
That
So of course, pandemic hit 3 months later.
of course. And it's funny too, because when I was actually going to finally try and take I had a friend down south that he was an open mic night guy. He said I could perform in Riverside, and then all this happened. And but I'm just making it to where once I have the ability, and even if I have to do it digitally, I'm just going to take that dive because I really want to do it. And one-liners, I appreciate your friend, because from Mitch Hedberg to a couple others.
Stephen Wright.
Yes. Oh, Stephen Wright.
People say to him, you know, that's an old joke. First of all, it wouldn't have gotten old if it wasn't good.
Yeah.
And second of all, the audience doesn't care.
Exactly.
I mean, I've seen his videos on stage, and I mean, because he's doing one-liners, the laughs are every 6-7 seconds. He's got a laugh,
Yep.
and then he sometimes leaves a recorder on, and I hear the poor guy comes up after him,
Uh-oh.
and it's just brutal.
Yeah.
To follow him. But again, they're old jokes. Yes, he's made them his own though. He makes it personal stories. You know, I call the front desk, I ask for a wake-up call. The woman goes, "You're an asshole and a drunk." Click. It's an old joke, but it works for him. And the audience doesn't know the difference because these are 60-year-old or 50-year-old jokes. You know, everything's old and new again.
Yeah.
So, so here's my advice on comedy.
And just one last thing to add to. Do you have a book, Frank?
I have 2 books of a 4-book series so far.
Fantastic. Well, the reason I asked is because it's so ironic that this just happened to be our first guest. Is I had bought a book. I still haven't cracked into it yet, but I know you wrote for was it the Tonight Show? You said.
Yeah.
And I bought a book by a guy named John Max. He wrote a book called "What Makes America Laugh at Bedtime" or something, and he was a writer for the Tonight Show. But I'm almost thinking I might shelf that one and check out some of yours because I like your style.
Well, and here's the book I'd recommend. The woman's name is Judy Carter. Judy Carter. She wrote the Comedy Bible.
Ooh.
Make sure you get the one that was published in October of last year, the latest one.
October, okay.
Yeah, it's a revision of the original. The first one had stuff about sitcom writing and movie writing. This one is pretty much nothing but how to create a stand-up act. And she walks it through it. It's practically fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and my advice is go to an open mic night twice. Just sit there and watch.
Okay.
And see how bad 85% of the people are.
Okay.
Learn what not to do.
Yeah, that's what I did. I thought, let's see what the competition's like. So first 2 times I went, sat, and thought, I'm at least that funny just walking around. Third time I got up with my old 5 minutes. And, you know, I probably would shudder now if I heard it. But at the time, it was good. And I thought, I heard inside my head, I'm home. This is what I'm going to do for a living. I have no idea how, but this is what I'm going to do for a living. I'd wanted to do that since 4th grade anyway.
Yes.
But got the courage up, went a year later on the road, 7 years and change, no. So, yeah, buy the Comedy Bible. And what major city are you near?
Well, right now it's like I might as well be on Mars in a cave because I live in Bishop, California, which is so far removed. The closest city to me would be that is worth comedy, I guess, would be Los Angeles, about 400 miles away. But Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm about to be relocating here soon because this was kind of a blip on the map, and I'm gonna get back to where I need to be.
Y'all gotta go hide in a cave for a couple of years, and then we can reemerge, right?
Yeah. Well, and here's what I would do when you get to a town of any size that has a comedy club, and comedy clubs are open again. Almost every comedy club has a 6 or 12-week comedy course.
Okay.
And it's not really, because I taught a class when I was in Raleigh, and the people I taught they really didn't need the class. They're already funny. They needed the organizational skills. They needed to get on stage half dozen times, stare into the lights, learn the mic techniques, help them put their 5 minutes together. And then they always have a graduation where you invite friends and family to do your 5 minutes. And so it's a great way to start comedy.
Yeah. I know I have a lot of comedian friends out here in Seattle. That's where I'm based. And that's what they do. They have a community within the comedy clubs, and I get to make friends out of those groups. Thank God, because they're the best people. Comedians are the best.
Yeah, actually, years ago we lived on Whidbey Island, and I was coming back from it.
Love Whidbey Island.
Yeah, I come back from a gig, and there was an open mic night at the Seattle Comedy Underground, and I played it decades before got paid, but I'd never been to the open mic night. So I went to the open mic night and decided to go in undercover. Sort of like the grocery store always has a soft opening before they do the grand opening, just to see how things are.
Yeah.
So I go in there, didn't tell anybody that I was a comedian. At this point, I've been doing comedy probably 25 years. I go, hey, how's this comedy thing work? They go, you sign your name right here. You sit down, shut the fuck up till you hear your name. Okay. So I go up on stage, they introduce me, Frank King. I can't remember what the introduction was, but it was first time here. And I had put together 5 minutes of really sweet, topical, tight comedy. And the last joke was, I don't remember the rest of the last joke was, hey, you know that Al-Qaeda has opened up a branch in Somalia. And they've created Osama bin Laden wristwatches, which they're giving to new recruits. Osama bin Laden has wearables. Hey, kids, what time is it? It's Saudi duty time.
It's Saudi duty time.
The MC comes on stage, he grabs my hand, and he won't let go. He goes, okay, jackass, how long have you been doing comedy? I go, I just started. He goes, that's bullshit. I go, about 25 years. He turns to the guys, all the comics in the back of the room, and he goes, I've told you, sons of bitches.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I have been here in Seattle. Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like that's a perfect segue to what we wanted to end this interview with, and that's just asking you, Mr. Frank, who are your favorite comedians? The ones that really soothe your soul, if you will. Because like this last election week, I found myself just popping on all my favorite comedians. I needed to laugh. I needed to stop taking things so serious. So like, who would those be for you? Your go-to, like, I know they're going to make me laugh and feel better. Please share.
Well, Dave Chappelle on Saturday Night Live did a masterful job.
Just watched it.
Yep.
Yes.
And different than his usual set, and longer. I'm sure they had to cut a sketch.
Oh, yeah.
But day in, day out, the guy named Bill Burr.
Yes.
Yeah. Am I allowed to curse on your
Yeah.
podcast?
Holy
Okay.
shit. Yes. Yeah. Feel free.
Yeah. Well, somebody turned me on to Bill Burr, and I can't believe that as funny as he is, I've never heard of him, and he's been doing it forever. So I go on YouTube, I find him, and the first joke I heard was, yeah, my mom said to me, how come you can't be more like your father? I said, okay, fuck you, I'm leaving. I thought, I'm in. I'm absolutely in.
Yes.
Now,
Godson.
across the pond, Jimmy Carr. Smart, funny, topical, filthy. But amazingly, if you look up on YouTube, the world's most offensive joke, you'll find Jimmy. He comes out on stage. He's got a baby face. He doesn't look like he'd be talking like that. He says to the audience, look, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to be offensive, and I'm going to crank up the offensive every joke just a notch until somebody screams at me, oh, for fuck's sake. And he does it. It's amazing to watch him crank up the
Yes.
disgusting. And finally, somebody in the audience screams out, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" So
So that
yeah.
was
Now let me leave you the fun. Let me leave you the funny story. I don't know about you, but every now and then I like to screw around with neuronormal people.
Oh,
Yeah.
Every now and then, when somebody says, "How you doing?" I tell them. I was in Sacramento. I'd done 2 3-hour suicide prevention CE trainings. I was exhausted. I get in the car, nice kid, Uber. His eyes meet mine in the rearview mirror. He goes, "Hey, man, how you doing?" I said, "I'm depressed and suicidal. How about you?" Long pause. He goes, "What am I supposed to say to that?" I said, "Do you really want to know?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "You're supposed to ask if I have a plan." Pause. "Do you have a plan?" Another pause. And then he says, "Does it involve Uber?"
Yes, that's perfect way to wrap things up, Frank. Oh my gosh, we so appreciate you taking the time for our little old podcast.
Yes.
These things are important. We need to be talking about them, and we're so grateful that you are on here with us, and we get to help spread this information. And I hope it leads people to the work you're doing, because we all need to be working together. So thank you for agreeing to work with us.
Make sure you put my phone number in the show notes. 858-405-5653, which is LAFF, something from my previous career. And every keynote I do, I put it on the screen. I said, "Audience, look, here's the deal. If you're suicidal, call the lifeline, text the text line. If you're just having a really shitty day, call a crazy person. Here's my phone number." Because we're less likely to be judgmental. We're just going to listen. We're just, when normal people say to me, "What do I say to my friend who's depressed?" Don't say anything.
Yeah.
Just actively listen.
Yep.
And people call me about themselves, about their friends, family, looking resources.
Yep.
I'll give you one more funny story. Kid called me, young guy, I could tell by his voice. He goes, "Man, I can't believe this is your cell." I go, "How mean would that be? Put it up on the screen. Got a bad day. Call me." I said, "And what if you got this? Hold, please."
Yeah.
And I said, "I'll make it one worse. Being a comedian, I'll make it one step worse. Oh, the on hold music is another one bites the dust, and another one down, and another one down." Yeah.
Frank, you're so wonderful.
I'm going to be one of the first crazies calling you here pretty soon. And I also want to say,
Frank, you're our new uncle, okay?
Right?
Like it or not.
and I know you're a comedian, so I don't want to make your head this big, but I think you saved another life, sir. So just, man,
You
you
saved
are
the house, Frank.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I tell my clients, look, we may save somebody today. And, I did a show, 2 shows, 2 shifts of at a factory in Iowa. They had a safety day, and they decided to make it mental health, suicide prevention. So I did a show for the morning shift, show for the afternoon shift. And I talked to the meeting planner a couple of weeks ago. She goes, "Frank, you have no idea the impact." Big, burly guys, because it's 90% men, wandered into the nurses. They have 2 nurses on staff. Wandered in the nurse's office and said, "Look, I got to tell you, that stuff Frank was talking about? I'm having that problem right now." Nobody had ever come in and said that before I got there. Yeah. So,
it opens up, it makes it safe. I feel like having that comical side to it makes it feel safer, just the whole topic of suicide. So, golly, thank you so much, Frank. I hope you enjoy the rest of this week.
Yeah, and, well, we have a new president. I'm feeling very hopeful.
We do. Yes. Let's all feel hopeful together. And let's all try and unite and love each other. So thank you so much, Frank.
My pleasure, guys. Let me know when it posts. Send me a link and I'll repost it on my social media.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
I'm excited. Thanks, Frank.
And what are we going to do right now? Buy the URL, correct?
Yes.
Domain name?
Yes.
Buy the URL. Yes. Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.